Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest Brexit blow for British manufacturing, as companies are concerned that the UK government doesn't seem all that bothered about letting our market be flooded with cheap state-subsidised Chinese imports. This threatens a lot of jobs, but it also highlights as yet an unused aspect of our trade deal with the EU, which could cause even more problems if triggered. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So Brexit hasn't just made it more difficult to export, it puts British producers at risk from cheaper imports as well. Throughout the Brexit process, the only serious argument against being out of the EU I ever heard was from advocates of completely free markets. You know, the EU single market is as free as you can get when it comes to international trade anywhere in the world. But it's very protectionist when it comes to trade from outside, just like the United States, just like everywhere, in fact. And the argument for genuinely global free trade, that's a compelling one. Global productivity would be way higher without trade barriers, certainly. But there are two main problems with the argument. The first is that the rest of the world isn't going to join in with this free trade philosophy just because the UK left the single market. Because all it would mean is that when conducting trade agreements with other countries, we'd be at a massive disadvantage because we're already giving easy access to our market through this philosophy. So there's not very much for us to offer. And so it has proved. Our post-Brexit trade deals are at best the same as the ones we had as EU members, with ones with the larger economies being on worse terms. But the second problem is that the only people dreaming of this global free trade utopia are the very people who complain about, say, migration and borders. Well, free trade requires free movement of traders and basically no borders. So the very people moaning about protectionism in international trade are some of the biggest proponents of protectionism, seemingly without even having the wit to realise it. So we're trapped in this limbo when it comes to international trade now. The Tory Brexit government wants deregulation, and they say they want deregulation to make trade freer. And they've lowered import barriers, sort of for the same reason. But they won't allow people to come and trade. For an economy that's essentially service-driven, this is not helpful. And the latest outlet for this contradictory philosophy seems to be centred around Chinese aluminium extrusions. Basically, the Chinese state has been heavily subsidising production, and there are fears they're going to be dumped on markets all over the world. The US has set tariffs on these products to 33.3%. They're not messing about when it comes to protecting their own business interests. The EU haven't gone quite so severe, but they have nonetheless applied tariffs of 22.1% in order to prevent dumping in the single market. Now the UK also has tariffs on these, but at the much lower 10.1%, half of the EU's tariffs and a third of America's. The fear is that the UK rate is not enough to stop these extrusions flooding the British market. Indeed, British industry has said so. And that would put factories out of business, with all the job losses that entails. And you have to be careful with manufacturing. As was more than highlighted in Thatcher's 80s, an entire town's economy can be reliant on a particular industry. If you let it fall, the domino effect means you've made another ghost town that won't recover for a generation, if ever. And it doesn't take much. And you think, why wouldn't the UK government increase the tariffs? It's completely justified because the Chinese extrusions are only cheap because the Chinese government pumps loads of money into their manufacture. The FT report on this noted that in 2019, 85% of all subsidies for the aluminium industry throughout the entire world went to 5 Chinese companies. And it's not like we'd be doing anything different to other intended markets. The EU and the US are bracing themselves against the flood. It's not a direct result of Brexit as such. We could apply higher tariffs if we wanted. We're just choosing not to. Or at the moment, anyway, that's the plan. Obviously, we do have a new government. They may change their mind. And this is what's worth noting, though. It is a choice, whatever it ends up being. It's a choice. The government, at the moment, the official line is the government is choosing to allow British manufacturers to go under. But for what reward? What do we get out of this? You can understand why we have low import barriers. That's not helping us at all, but you can understand it. It's because we don't have the facilities or the staff to carry out proper checks without strangling imports. The government can't afford proper border controls. They've said as much. But tariff levels don't require tens of thousands of staff you don't have. It just requires a ministerial direction. Oh, put the tariff up to 25%. And this will have wider implications as well. So the EU have set their tariffs for these aluminium extrusions to protect themselves from Chinese imports made cheap because of unfair state aid. This is a lesson for us in Britain as well. When Boris Johnson agreed the trade and cooperation agreement with the EU, he hailed it as a tariff-free deal. But it isn't. That was a lie. It's only tariff-free if two conditions are met. The first is that the goods meet rules of origin requirements. In other words, that enough of the product you can prove has been produced in the UK or the EU. This is not just a potentially expensive exercise to prove. You've got to get all the paperwork together, but not all of our goods will meet the requirements. So there are British exports to the EU which are subject to tariffs, whatever Johnson says. But there's a second condition as well. It just hasn't come into play yet. The EU secured clauses that meant if Britain tries to give an unfair advantage to our own producers through whether deregulation or state aid, then the EU can apply or raise tariffs on British goods to compensate. Even the ones where there's no tariffs at the moment, even the ones where rules of origin are met. We can see the sort of thing here with the aluminium extrusions. The EU have said these goods are not produced on a level playing field with our own manufacturers, so we're going to even things out by applying these tariffs. This is precisely what the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the UK allows the EU to do. Tory Brexiteers keep going on about the need to remove regulations to make our manufacturers more competitive, but that is not what it will do. It's not even just the EU either. All of our export markets will take action if we attempt to change the way we produce things in order to undercut their own businesses. Because it's only the UK that seems willing to sacrifice its own manufacturing base. Every other major market, whether it be an individual country like China or the US, or a trading bloc like the EU, Mercosur, or even the CPTPP that we keep pretending to join, they will just apply tariffs against our goods. These boneheads know nothing of modern trade. They're living in a past that doesn't exist anymore, if it ever did. There's no way of making our production more competitive through crude measures like deregulation or state aid when it comes to products that other markets also produce. A little bit different if it's products that they don't but they still want. Because that's the only way really to be competitive. If you're going to insist on raising trade barriers to make it harder to export, the only way is more efficient production methods and making things that the rest of the world actually wants to buy. You know, that they can't or don't make themselves. If the government wants to get involved in British manufacturing, it should be through research and development of advanced technology that the rest of the world isn't producing yet. But no, deregulation's their thing. They read about it in a book written probably while Victoria was on the throne and go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And in pursuit of this twisted ideology, they're giving the impression they'll sacrifice British industry in the misguided belief that a new and better industry will emerge from the ashes, while producers around the world look at us in bemusement. What are they doing? They think that they do this and we'll do the same. Will we? But maybe, I mean, I've said it before, this Brexit mindset is very much like withdrawing all the money from your bank and just giving it to random people in the street and then going out the next day and expecting everyone else to do the same. But anyway, maybe Sunak's government will be more pragmatic. You know, we'll find out in a few weeks if our new Prime Minister, though a determined Brexiteer himself, at least understands trading realities. Because if he doesn't, this one might be the first test of that trade and cooperation agreement. Because if we do allow all these Chinese extrusions, aluminium extrusions into our market, the EU will need to make sure they don't end up being used in products that then enter theirs, undercutting their own businesses. They may actually apply tariffs to some of our stuff as a result of it. So it may not even just put British factories out of business. It may put more businesses out of action because the EU may have to raise tariffs on products that even meet rules of origin. But anyway, there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.